Hey guys, and welcome back to another video from AT Square. Now, in today's video, we're going to continue with our functions lesson by learning about inner functions and nested functions, okay? So the first example is going to focus on nested functions, while the second example is going to focus on inner functions, okay? Now, setting that aside, let's get on with the lesson, shall we? Okay, so before we get into nested functions, I want to clarify some things about our previous video, okay? I want to correct some things. So let's look at this function called sum of list from our previous video. Now, when I talked about integers, I mentioned it as attributes, okay? But it's not called attributes in Python. Attributes come into play when we're talking about functions and classes together, which we'll get into more detail in a later video. But basically what I want to clarify is that integers are actually known as parameters of a function, okay? So any information inside this bracket of a function is known as parameters, and the function uses it as an input. In this case, it does use as an input, and it stores it in a variable called integers, and then it uses it right here, okay? So parameters are used when you call the function. So when you call the function, so sum of list, you actually add a value for integers that the function can use, okay? Now, I want to get into another thing that I forgot to mention as well. When we pass any value into a function, such as, let's say in this case, I put in 6, right? So the function will take in the value 6 and assign that value to the variable known as integers, so it can be used in the function. Now, any information or any data that is passed into the function is known as arguments, okay? So arguments is information that is passed into the function, while the information inside the brackets for the definition of the function is known as parameters, okay? So I just wanted to clear that out of the way so you guys have a better understanding of it, okay? It's just my mistake and I just wanted to correct it. Now, setting that aside, we can get on with our first example of nested functions. Okay, so in the first example, I'm going to show you how to actually nest two functions together. And then in the next example, I'm going to show you how you can make individual functions, but allow one function to call another function. Not nest them together, keep them individually, but still allow one to call another, okay? But let's get on to this example first. So I'm going to create a program which creates a personal greeting for the user. So in order to do this, we're going to create two nested functions, okay? So let's first do our first function called greeting, okay? And in greeting, we have two parameters known as first and last, which is supposed to represent the first and last name of our user. And then inside the greeting function, we have another function known as get underscore full name, okay? And in this function, we don't have any parameters as of now. So what we're going to do is that this function is going to return the first plus a space plus last, okay? That's what it's going to do. So what it's going to do is that it's going to combine the first and last name of the user, but also add a space in between the names, okay? And then in the end, we just do print hi space comma get full name and then comma exclamation mark, okay? But we're still not done. We just defined our two functions, but now we have to call our function. Now you might be wondering, if we have a nested function, what function do we call? Well, this is our sub function. What I'm trying to say is that this is just a function inside a much bigger function, because this function right here, greeting, encompasses this entire block of code, while this function just encompasses this block of code. So this is actually the larger function, which controls the execution of the remaining block of code. So we're going to actually call this function at the top. So we're going to do greeting. And since we already have a print statement, we don't have to print it. So greeting. And let's call this John. And then let's call this Connor. Now I chose these two names out of the top of my head, okay? Definitely not a reference to a popular sci-fi movie, okay? So let's actually run our program now to see if we did it right, shall we? So run the program. Okay, it says hi John Connor. That's good, and that's what we want. And we can actually remove the spaces here to make it look a little more clean. Okay, that looks better. And we can also remove the print statement here. We can do return. And then we can actually add our print statement right here instead, with just proper form. So let's see if this works, shall we? There we go. We got it. But we got it as a list. So, yeah. Okay, guys. That's the end of the first example. In the next example, I'm going to show you how you can make one function call another separate function. Okay? So, we're going to create a program which adds the area of 3 squares using nested functions. So, our first function is going to be involved with calculating the area of a single square. Okay, so let's call this square underscore area. And in the brackets, I'm going to put in a parameter known as side. Okay, so now let's create a variable known as area. So area, and the area of a square is side times side. Okay, and then in the end, we just do return area. Oh, forgot an R there. Okay, so now let's create the second function which calls upon this function, okay? And that's going to be involved with calculating the sum of the area of our 3 squares. So let's do sum of squares. And in the brackets, let's do the parameters x, y, and z. Okay, I'll tell you why we need to do this. And now we need to create additional variables as well. So let's call this first square equals square area x. Okay? And then we have to repeat the process for the other 2 squares. So let's call this second square and third square. Third square. And let's call this y, and then the last one z. Okay? So, and then afterwards, we're going to create another variable called sum, and sum equals first square plus second square plus third square. Okay? Now you don't have to create a variable known as sum. You can just put a return statement right here and then do this. But I like to split up my tasks, okay? But either way works. So it's just preference at that point. So return sum. And I spelled my return wrong. There we go. So now we define both of our functions, but then we have to call it, okay? We don't have to call this one because if we call this one, it automatically calls this function, okay? So let's actually call our function. So let's say let's just call this result. Result equals sum of squares, and then let's put some values in. So let's put 9, 7.89, and then 34.5. And I also have to print result, because I didn't put a print statement inside my function. Okay, so let's see what we get. Okay, so the sum of my area is 1,333.5. Okay, and I can round this to 2 decimal places as well. Now I'll explain to you what just happened. So we defined our first function. We can refer to this as a sub function. known as square area and gave it a parameter known as side. And that's the side of our square. And this function calculates the area of our square by doing side times side and then returning the value. Now, we defined another function known as sum of squares, which has three parameters, x, y, z, okay? So this is arbitrary. You can put this in any name you want. I just put it x, y, z for the simplicity, okay? And then inside the function, we created three variables, first square, second square, and then third square. And these variables, let's look at first square in this case. It actually uses the square area function to calculate the area of whatever value the user enters for x, okay? Whatever argument is passed in for x. And the same case goes for y for the second square and z for the third square, okay? And then in the end, we just simply add all the values. First square plus second square plus third square. And then, as always, we return the final value. And then in the end, after defining my functions, I called it, I put it to the variable known as result, and then I printed the result, which is 1333.5 units. Okay? Okay, guys, that's the end of today's video. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, feel free to subscribe, hit the like button, and share this video with anyone who's interested in programming with Python. Now, until the next video, this is a bye from Ashwin's Tech Talks. See ya, guys.